All right, and we are back. Welcome into another episode of Keeping Up with the New York Jets. Alongside Teddy Pristash, I am Blake Pace. Today is Wednesday, March 13th, the official start of free agency, but we've got a loaded episode. 2 days of legal tampering have already begun. The Jets have brought some guys back. Lost a guy that was very important. Brought a bunch of guys back as well, too. We're going to get into all of that and what we want to happen.
Whoa, buddy.
Whoa.
You all right?
What we want to happen next. I got to tell Teddy this beforehand. We are recording this at 7:30 Central Time. I've been up since 2 a.m. Central Time, so I am going to try my best here, but I think I just had a stroke. So we're going to
Yeah,
get
that's
into
tough. No sleep.
no sleep, gang. I will be crawling into my bed immediately after we finish recording. But basically a big free agency pod. But before we get there, we did this 2 weeks ago. I want to start off with a red hot Do You Care segment. We did a few of these to start off our new show, and I've got a fiery one, Theodore. The website, KennedyRogers.com, was registered last week, made an official domain name, and RFK Jr. has spoken pretty continuously with Aaron Rodgers for the past month about becoming his vice president, running independently for the election in 2024. Teddy, do you care?
It's a tough question to answer. I don't really care. I don't think. When I saw this first tweet, shout out Leroy, PFT's dog. That was the
Dead
first
dog.
tweet I saw of it. And I was like, oh, haha, that's a joke. And then I saw some more tweets and like news articles. And I was like, oh, this is real. Like, what does this mean? And it's basically saying like he's one of two candidates, hasn't said no yet. So that's wild. Do I care? No, I don't think it's something that will come to fruition. It would be an insane, insane heel turn for Aaron Rodgers after like all the things he's preached over the past couple of years about like how excited he is to play football to just be like, yeah, I'm just not doing that anymore.
Bigger
And it would
calling is
be a
coming my
super
way.
Jets thing to happen for sure. But no,
Yeah.
I don't think I care. You guys can come back and roast me if this turns out to bite me in the ass.
Yeah, I definitely don't care either. I just thought it was extremely funny. This started coming out about an hour before we were recording. I guess Leroy had it a little bit earlier than
I'm like
that, but just like,
confused.
I'm like, what does that even mean? Independent. He's probably not even going to make it, that far along. He probably drops out at some point. Is Rodgers going to spend his off season now that he's fully rehabbed, just like traveling around with RFK and getting, into politics? So yeah, I don't really care. My favorite tweet that I saw throughout this, because everybody, loves to clown the Jets as we always do. My favorite tweet was it was like at RFK. I promise you that if you make Alan Lazard your vice president, you will win both New York and New Jersey for the upcoming election. Just like get Alan Lazard away from the Jets, and you
Yeah,
will win
yeah,
New
yeah.
York and New Jersey. So that was my favorite thing I saw from it. Just funny way to start things off. I don't know what it means. I don't get it. I don't care though. That's the
Yeah, I'm with
premise
you.
of it. How are you doing though?
I'm with you.
I didn't get to ask you. How are you? I got right
I'm
into
good. I'm
politics.
good. It's been a fun couple days, been scrolling on Twitter, been trying to figure out like I'm just dying to know what's gonna happen next, both for the Jets and just in general in the league. It's
Hmm.
just fun to like and you scroll and you see 36 seconds ago, someone tweeted something and when you get to see that right away, it's fun. But yeah, I mean I'm doing good. It hasn't been the most um I would say like star-studded free agency class from the Jets so far.
Hmm.
Pretty expected in my opinion. We'll
Yep.
obviously get into all the different moves, but yeah, I've been enjoying it, I guess. How about you? How are you? You went to Universal this past couple days?
I did. Yes, I was down in sunny Orlando with my dad, my sister, and then me and my sister's significant others, which is a wild crew. Then my other
Nice.
sister
Good
stopped
crew.
down for a day, but partied hard, spent a fuck ton of money. I got to tell you, that is a scam over there at those amusement
I'm
parks.
sure. I'm
The
sure.
so it's spring break week. I'll just do this very quickly. I'm so mad about it. It's spring break week, and so everybody's down there. They're all doing the parks, whatever. So you have to kind of get fast pass, or else you'll spend the entire day waiting in 2 hour lines to go on 3 rides. Here's the problem: a
Yep.
normal ticket, $225. Fast pass is $300 on top of the original ticket. So we spent like $550 a person to go around and fuck around at a park all day. And don't get me wrong, I had a ton of fun, but just like What a scam. To skip the line, it is extra. It's basically a second ticket. It's
Yeah, that's
madness.
unreal. That's
But yeah,
unreal.
I'm very sleep
Fuck them.
deprived. I'm cranky, but I had a great time and yeah, shout out to Florida. I've been establishing residency there this year. I've been on many a vacations.
Yeah, for
One
real.
thing that I missed, that was the other thing with the trip, is I kind of was only on my phone ever so often, and I must have been on a ride when this one happened because last night I was like, did they say anything about Bryce Huff? And it was like one of the first things that came out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bryce Huff at the beginning of free agency signs a 3-year, $51 million deal with the Philadelphia Eagles. Howie Roseman poaches the homegrown talent away from his former vice president of player personnel, Joe Douglas. Um, it was put out a few days beforehand that the Eagles were exploring trade options for both D ends Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick. This allows them to now further those conversations while bringing in Huff and giving him exactly what he wants. He wanted a bigger payday. The average value of this contract is $17 million a year. I'm sure it works out differently where the first two are a little bit closer to the 14, 15 with a higher third year. If he can make it to that final season. And he's going to get more playing time as well, too, with those defensive ends gone. So we knew this was happening. As each week that we've done this, it's gotten more increasingly
Yeah.
obvious that
Yeah.
he was going to be gone, but it went quick, and it doesn't look like the Jets made much of a play either to keep him around.
No, yeah, which I mean, if you didn't have those contract talks beforehand, you're not going to have them right as free agency starts. Yeah, not surprising. It came out like, days before that the Eagles were very interested in him. And then, do I have you, brother?
Do you not have me? I have
Oh, I
you.
have you. All right, we're
I
good.
say
We're
I
good. We're
have you.
good. Apologies. But yeah, so not ideal, definitely sucks, but you see the average payout. Obviously, we'll see how it, lands or whatever, what the actual guaranteed money is, but 17 million a year we thought wasn't going to be something that the Jets were going to pursue. We had known that he wanted to leave the Jets, go somewhere that was going to promise him more playing time, get on the field more than, 55, 56% of the snaps or 40% of the snaps, whatever it was last year. So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with the fans. This one stings a little. It feels like, you know, this is a homegrown guy that we hit on that was super solid for us last year. You would have loved to keep him around. Um, and like if you're not going to keep him around, maybe try to trade him, when we're in the middle of last year, which was just a shit show from the start. We obviously at different times throughout the season wanted to make it seem like we were ready to like push to contend and get a playoff spot. But after, week 5 or 6, we kind of had mailed that in and we're like, this is just not going to happen. Um, so yeah, not ideal. I don't know. Like, I'm not surprised by it. I don't think like the Jets are the dumbest people in the world, but I do think it was just kind of like a missed opportunity if you weren't going to have those contract talks with him all throughout last year. You had drafted Will McDonald in the first round, which, people are a little mad about at this point, but it's like if that's going to be your plan, why not trade Bryce Huff when he's having his breakout season? Try to get ahead of it or try to negotiate a contract, which I don't think he was willing to do. I think he wanted to wait for the payday, but it just seems like there was some kind of avenue we could have taken to benefit from this.
You almost wonder if because Rodgers midway through the season or early in the season was like, there's a chance I'm coming back for the playoffs. Like if the Jets can stay afloat, we can contend and push for the playoffs. If that made the front office evaluate, and try and keep guys around for that case. Because there is a chance when you look at how the
Maybe.
season ended up playing out, it would have been better to bottom out. It would be better now to be picking at 5 than 10. It would be better to have gotten something in return for trading Bryce Huff at the deadline if that was a plan. So that's where I agree. I don't think they would have gotten the contract done because Bryce wanted to wait for that payday, but it still hurts to lose a guy for virtually nothing. You could even argue they got him for nothing as an undrafted free agent, but just because you spent time and invested in him, you should have gotten something on the way out. My only spin zone that I have for this is something that we talked about 2 weeks ago. We've talked about the last few years. It's always been my opinion when it comes to free agency is guys are free agents for a reason. Now there are guys, and maybe Huff is one of them, where make a mistake, you don't bring a guy back, and he thrives in his new home. But there are a lot of those situations where a team knows players and a front office knows players better than anybody else in the entire league, in the media, in the fan base, and they have spent time around Bryce Huff since the beginning of his career. And if 17 million a year, roughly, if that's what we're saying there, is a guy that might not be capable of playing all three downs, and maybe he is just a premier pass rush specialist. Maybe that is why the Jets weren't really willing to open up the pocketbook here for Bryce Huff and bringing him in. We already know that the defense isn't built that way. Bryce Huff was not going to be a three-down player. Saleh believes that they're going to rotate, go 8 to 10 deep there. But usually, in the grand scheme of things, you keep players that are good and at the value. If Bryce Huff is maybe not the best guy outside of pass rush opportunities, maybe he's not worth 17 million. I wish him nothing the best. He was a great player for the Jets, but I'm just giving myself that little bit of pause there and not totally bashing them, because who has spent more time around Bryce Huff over the last few years? It's Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, and they made this decision together, assumedly.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a solid point. I also think there is that aspect, right, of okay, this team has identified needs of, we've talked about it, an offensive tackle or just linemen in general. We need to add to the wide receiver room. There's other holes you need to fill. Like potentially, if you're only going to get a couple big contracts out, and obviously we need to see the Jets do this and actually get one of those guys before we can fully agree with this. But if that is the plan, right, you're sitting there last year and you're kind of figuring things out and you're like, all right, we're going to have around this much money. Like maybe it just wasn't the plan to bring him back. I do want to touch on Will McDonald quick.
Yeah.
Just because it's very easy for Jets fans to be very frustrated, right? We give up Huff. It feels like we could have drafted, potentially a receiver at that position. Obviously, hindsight's 2020, but it's easy to kind of pick apart that pick. And I think my only kind of like hold on a second is that this is exactly what we did with Jermaine Johnson. We all panicked. We all, he didn't play a ton of snaps in his rookie year, and he did come out and became an elite player. Like Jermaine Johnson definitely did take that step. So I'm not saying Will McDonald is for sure going to do it, but I do have some trust in that process of like, just because he wasn't playing a ton in his rookie year, when they had a guy like Huff, when they had other players that they were prioritizing, like I'm not just going to go automatically assume that Will McDonald is trash because of that, because the same thing happened with Jermaine Johnson and now he's a star. So there's obviously a lot of factors at play here. Sucks to lose him. McDonald needs to step up, but yeah.
And to further that point, there will be more edges brought in too. It's not like this is going to be the depth chart at the end of the day. Will they be a premier guy? Probably not. Those are not really that available on the market, especially in free agency at the moment. But there are going to be more additions to where if Will makes that step, you've got somebody that even fills in his role. And again, it's just the style of this defense at the end of the day. So we have made him the talking point of almost the last 3 episodes. I think we can officially put the chapter on that. I do want to give him a shout out though. That's pretty cool, being the highest paid undrafted free agent that's non-quarterback in NFL history. That's pretty cool for him. Biggest contract given out to a UDFA that's not a quarterback in NFL history. That's a pretty cool feat.
Fuck yeah.
And shout out
Yeah,
to
it was like the biggest like main talking point of this offseason. So for sure, every time he does something good with the Eagles, we're going to hear about it. Everyone's going to be talking about it, but
Yep.
That'll be fun.
Yep, exactly. Hopefully the Eagles are just a big dumpster fire next year. So,
nah, they're going to ball. They're going to
yeah.
ball.
Who's leading them?
Obviously, my boy Jalen.
All right, I'm just messing. Let's continue talking about the Jets.
Let's do an Eagles podcast.
Ted's gonna go. Ted's a Steelers fan next year with Russell Wilson. He's an Eagles fan with Jalen Hurts next year.
Listen,
anybody else I'm forgetting?
Jalen Hurts being in the same sentence as Russell Wilson is fucked up. I will say, part of
2
me
quarterbacks
does want to
of
low key
Pittsburgh.
buy back into to Russell Wilson, but
sure you
we
do.
will save that for another
I'm
day.
sure you do. God, I'm gonna clip that and just put it in the group chat for us to
That's
talk
fine.
about.
That's fine.
All right, let's get back to the Jets. We can breeze through some of these pretty quickly. They took care of a couple in-house guys so far. Greg Zuerlein brought back in Chuck Clark.
Love that move. Great fucking move.
Go ahead.
Need
Start
a
it off.
kicker. No, it's fine. It's fine. But you just need a great kicker. He was a great kicker. Lock him up. Love it.
Yeah, no need to venture out and try and shake things up. He had something that worked. He wanted to stay. He's a little bit older, but still had one of his best seasons of his long career. And Rodgers spoke about the importance of both Zerline and Morstead this past year for the Jets and the importance in bringing both of them back. And it seems Morstead did like a little subtle
Yeah,
tweet
yeah.
of like the March 13th, 4:01 p.m.,
It's the
almost as
time
if
that
like
free agency starts.
so
Yeah.
he will be back with the Jets, which will be a great thing. This one I'm really excited about. If you're calling with Greg Zerline, I'll raise you Chuck Clark. Traded for a 7th round pick last offseason. Never saw the field in 2023 after tearing his ACL and OTAs. With the way the roster is shaping out in the safety room and they haven't been, active, there's still room for them to be active in free agency. It hasn't even technically begun. I wouldn't be surprised if Chuck Clark is starting next year. And so there was a lot of hype around when the Jets acquired him, and it's the craziest story and the most Jets-like story where he was on this crazy snap streak of playing on the field, like 1,200 straight snaps on the field, and then
Jeez.
OTAs, the knee snaps, and you're just like, what the fuck? Um,
Yeah.
but he brought back, going to give it another shot next year. I think this is a guy that'll play a really pivotal role. Maybe not the most important position, but something that needs more stability than what we had the last few years.
Yeah, obviously he got hurt so quickly that it was kind of hard to like get a read on what was actually going to happen. But
Hmm.
for sure, a lot of people were expecting him to kind of step in and be that guy. Like you said, obviously a lot more that could be done at safety. But if I'm sitting there with Chuck Clark and Tony Adams as my safeties, I don't hate that, right away.
Yeah.
So yeah, decent signing, bringing him
And
back.
anything on Kenny Yeboah?
No. It's cool, I guess. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't think the Jets are going to draft Brock Bowers at 10. Probably has
No.
nothing to do with this. But while we're on the topic of tight ends, I don't think that's going to happen.
If they draft Brock Bowers at tight end with the 10th pick, I think I will fucking lose my mind over here. I love
Yeah,
Brock.
yeah, I
I think
don't
he's
think
gonna
so
be a
either.
really good player, but that's crazy to do for this situation.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some of the guys coming in. I think the big one, and he's not even going to be a starter next year. What? Go ahead. You seem like you want to say something.
Well, just real quick before we do this, right? So, free agency, I mean, everyone who's listening is aware, but we're all just dying for that move on Monday night or on Monday all day. We're like, come on, Jets, do something, do something. And obviously these re-signs had trickled in, but like nothing, re-signing the player that was on your team doesn't really count as like a major free agent acquisition. Then you woke up in the morning and it was like, oh, we kind of got a slew of players
Yeah.
here, It's just like, this is kind of all right, but that was just funny. Like Joe Douglas waited till like 11:30 for
Yeah.
the first move to be announced,
It was a middle
So yeah.
finger to, he knew Zach Rosenblatt's sleep time and he wanted to give a middle finger to the Athletics. So he let
Yeah,
Rosenblatt
that
go to
shit
bed
was so
and put
funny.
out all the news after. So
Yeah, yeah.
big,
Just
big
funny,
FU.
this is what the tampering period's all about, right? It's just like freaking out on Twitter, like the community about it, just like it's just fun.
Colts Twitter is miserable right now, and we're on the 8th year of Chris Ballard not signing anybody in free agency, and it's just like people get mad 8 years in a row. It's like he doesn't do it, dude. He's not going to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You have to pay an extra 5 million to convince somebody to play in Indiana, so he's just not going to go do that. You have to live here tax. Um,
Fair point. Fair
but
point.
back to the Jets, they did put out all those late night. I was leaving the park actually. I was still at the park when they all came out. But the biggest one, I think I was driving home, and we spent all fucking day there,
You
all
said
day.
park, and I was like, why were you at a park? But then I
Universal
remembered
Studios,
you went to
yes.
Universal. Right. I was like, what were you doing at a
Yeah, I
park at
should have said that.
11:30 at
I'm just,
night?
my nightly stroll through random parks,
Yeah.
waiting for Joe Douglas to
Jesus.
sign guys. The big
Right,
one's
right.
the big one's not a starter next year, hopefully. Quarterback Tyrod Taylor in from the New York Giants on a 2-year deal up to 18 million. We spoke last week about how quarterbacks at backup positions we're going to be pushing to 8-10 million per year. This is no surprise. He lands right in there. Good for him and having to probably not leave anywhere and go to a team that's more pushing for title contention. Whereas the Giants, he did have a few starts from last year, but I think they're a little bit further away at the moment, albeit maybe a little bit easier of a conference. But this is what we wanted out of a quarterback, really. I mean, he's a veteran who's been around. He's had a ton of starts throughout his career. Chargers, Bills, had a few starts for the Giants last year. He's been around. Ravens was his first go, I believe, even before the Bills, or he's been mixed all over the place, but he is experienced, tenured, not the best quarterback in the world, but you know what you're getting with him. You're getting a guy that can move, you're
Yeah.
getting a guy that will chuck it. He's a little risky sometimes, but he's not
No,
he's not Zach Wilson. He's not Trevor Simeon. He's not Mike White even. He's a good backup quarterback, and this is what the Jets needed.
Yes, this is exactly right. This is exactly what we wanted when we were thinking about the backup quarterback. The last 2 years have been like, we should bring in a veteran guy, blah, blah, blah. And the Jets have just not done it. You can say what you want about Joe Flacco and his comeback player of the year. I hated that strategy at the time. It was like a 38-year-old quarterback who hasn't played in 6 years or whatever it was. Like, I want someone who you can at least trust to go in and like actually move the ball a little bit with Mike White and, all the other random kind of backups that just got thrown in there. You'd never seen them play before. They'd never touched an NFL field before. You have absolutely no clue what they're going to bring to the table. To lock up a guy like Tyrod, I think Tyrod and Jacoby Brissett were my kind of number one options for them to get as backup quarterbacks. And listen, we're talking about backup quarterbacks here, but this is just something the Jets have ignored for so long. I don't care that it's an overpay. I don't care that, you know, obviously not all the money is going to be guaranteed, but it's still just like, hey, it's your backup quarterback. You're giving him this much money, but that is what we needed to do. We had said it and we went out and did it. Like, I'm amped about it, truthfully. If Aaron Rodgers becomes a vice president, then we have Tyrod Taylor at least, and I think we have at least a chance to win some games.
Yeah, I guess.
More so than
More so than
previous
last year, more
backups.
so than previous. Yeah, that's the big thing
Like
is like
if when Zach Wilson came in, it felt like our season was over. When Mike White came in, you know what I mean? Like with Tyrod, it's at least like we should be able to move the ball a little bit.
what happened is you threw me a curveball with the RFK vice president thing, and then my brain went
Okay.
blank for a little bit. So I was like, wait a minute, where were we? This feels so bizarro land sometimes, the shit that we say on this show, but it's all very real and all about the New York Jets. It's fucking crazy. But you have a 40-year-old quarterback coming off of a season-ending Achilles injury. He's an old dude. He's had a few injuries throughout his career. You do need somebody back there that you can say, hey, go make 6 starts for us this season. Will we go 3-3? I'll take it. Could we go 4-2 even? That would be fantastic. 65% completion percentage last year. Over his career, 65 touchdown passes to 29 picks. Has some wheels. I think that's the other big thing when I think about what the Jets need, and you just said it as well too. Like this offensive line still needs a mobile quarterback. We're not at a point yet where we have
Sure.
put this top 5 in here that can stand there and protect a quarterback that's standing in the pocket. He can move when he needs to. Um, I think it's the move I'll be most excited about for the Jets this offseason because it is a fail-safe plan to at least not lose your season 4 games in if something were to happen to Aaron Rodgers. Anything else on the Tyrod Taylor story?
No, I
He's played for all 3
think
New
I said
York
my
teams now.
piece.
That's pretty fun.
Yeah, he's a nomad traveler.
So yes, other signing at the time too, left guard John Simpson comes over to New York from Baltimore. 2 years, 2-year deal, basically the Tyrod Taylor 2-year deal worth up to 18 million in total. He will be the left guard. I think that's the biggest thing that when reading like the Jets press pieces put out and all of the people talking like he is the left guard. That was where he played all last year. He started 19 games for the Baltimore Ravens, coming off of his best career after being a bad offensive lineman with the Raiders a few seasons beforehand, gets to Baltimore, gets in a good offense. Career takes off at the right time, hitting free agency. He signs here with the Jets on a decent deal. And Theodore Pristash, all I can think of is, did we just tape John Simpson's face on Laken Tomlinson's body? This feels way too reminiscent to what we did when the Jets signed Laken to, albeit a bigger deal. 3 years for 30 million is a lot worse than 2 for 18. But Am I getting deja vu here? Do you have a glimmer of hope here that this is a little bit better?
Um, Not particularly. I mean, Lakin obviously turned out to be really bad, but at the time, I was under the impression he was a top guard, was going to come in and continue
Good
his
point.
Pro Bowl play. That's not what happened.
You can't fool me
Um,
again.
it is very funny, right? Like the idea that the Jets signed two bad linemen in a row isn't that crazy, or any team doing that, but you did either last week or 2 weeks ago specifically bring up like a lesson I learned. Like maybe don't trust a guy who gets to be right next to this great player and on a great line, and then they finally have their great year, and it is just a little like it lines up too perfectly with that. Um, so yeah, my take on this John Simpson thing, I'm not gonna say I hate the pick. It wasn't like he was a dumpster fire last year. Was he great? No. When you look, one of the best way I think there is to judge free agents is to utilize the other team's fan base, right? When Bryce Huff signs with the Eagles, all the Jets fans are like, man, you got a good one. When John Simpson signed, the Ravens fans are kind of like, yeah, he was our weakest link last year, which isn't what you love to hear for sure. Um, so it's like, do I think this is the greatest move in the world? No. I think my takeaway is like this is not all that's going to happen. Because this can't be like your premier offensive line ad, right? We can get mad if the Jets continue to not do stuff, but like the idea of John Simpson becoming our starter after he just started an entire year for the Ravens, I'm fine with that as long as they're able to kind of address the other positions a little bit better, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. We are going to talk about moves that we want to happen later. And Tyron Smith, as we're recording this, is still a free agent. And pairing him alongside sorry, excuse me, let me start over. Pairing Simpson alongside an older left tackle who has missed games through the last 5 seasons only sounds more reminiscent to Dwayne Brown and Laken Tomlinson. Like, are
Sure.
we? So
Sure.
I have officially changed my opinion on this. I do not want Tyrone Smith to sign with the New York Jets. I want the Jets to come out at the end of this offseason and say, we have officially decided Elijah Vera Tucker will be our left tackle for 2024 and beyond. That is his final position. I just don't love the idea of putting a guy that is 36, 37 years old next to an average or league average starting left guard. And if he goes down, then the left guard plays bad. Now, granted, Elijah Vera Tucker also 2 season-ending injuries, so you have to hope that he stays healthy for at least a good stretch the next few seasons. But I just hate the idea of taking an older guy that is very good and one of the best tackles of the last decade plus, but he is not that person anymore. And I worry that putting him next to Simpson, we are just recreating a maybe slightly better version of Dwayne Brown and Laken Tomlinson, but still a not good one to be protecting a 40-year-old quarterback in Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, well, let's be clear here. Tyron Smith only 33, not
I thought
36,
it
so
was
not quite as
36.
decrepit as you
Who am
described.
I thinking of?
Um, I don't know, probably Dwayne Brown's bitch ass.
Okay, 33 is
No,
not
I
that
don't
bad.
know. Yeah, I still see like to me, getting a guy like Tyrone Smith is like my top priority in my head. Um, just because like okay, we all assume we're going to take a tackle at 10, right? That's fine. But we do need to be addressing these other positions, and you would hope that, right, like the priority ad of free agency in my mind, we need to add a receiver and we need to add an offensive lineman. In my mind, I think Tyron Smith's the best option out there currently. So that's why I still like that plan. But, it's not a bad point, right? Like he's going to go from playing next to an all pro left tackle, which clearly is beneficial to, a guy who has had injury issues and whatnot. So
Yeah.
risky for sure. And it, unfortunately for the Jets, we are not going to be going into the 2024 season with an offensive line that we are like 100% confident in, right? And it kind of felt that way last year where it felt like we have good players. But, is Makai going to stay healthy? Is he going to be able to keep his play up? Is Lakin going to bounce back? How's the Tippmann McGovern thing going to work? You know what I mean? Like, you kind of had confidence in these players, but there were still those question marks. Unfortunately, that's going to be the case again this year. But like, I need some juice, like a guy, if it's not Tyrone Smith, then who is it? You know what I mean? Because you need a
Mhm.
guy who you at least feel somewhat confident can play and has the ability. Worry about injuries second is kind of how I view it.
Yeah, maybe it's not just AVT. Well, here's the thing: is AVT is going to be a tackle next year, depending what side. If he's not playing left guard, he's playing right tackle or left tackle. Right guard is the fifth most valuable spot along the offensive line, and you're not going to put your best player there. So I know AVT after this signing is
Yeah,
going to
and
be
I
a
wouldn't hate him
tackle.
at left tackle. I wouldn't.
I just think
That'd be
I'm of the mindset I would rather, and it's risky to do this, and it's exactly why Mekhi Becton will no longer be with the Jets after this season. But I'd rather just sit there and take a guy at 10. If it's Olufashanu, if it's the kid Fuaga out of Oregon State, I would rather just go into 2024 with my tackles being guys that just like aren't, and ABT is a question mark, so I have to say that too. But he's a younger question mark than even 33 question mark, where
yeah,
it's
who
been
we know
four
is elite
seasons.
when he plays.
And Tyron Smith, 4 seasons in a row, has missed games, two of them being he played 2 games one season, 4 games another season. So he's had significant injuries as well too. I'm almost of the mindset that if Simpson's the left guard and AVT is playing tackle, whether it's right or left, I would want that other side to be our first round pick. I don't want to put a first round pick at right guard. I'd rather just,
Sure, I'm cool with that. Go ahead, but then you got to sign a guard, right? Like we still need to fill
but you
these
can
holes.
you
I
can
don't
sign a
want.
right guard. You don't need a
Sure,
great right guard. The
I
right guard
guess.
is always
Yeah,
going to be your least valuable. Or maybe you get a center and you move Tippmann to right guard. He can play right
yeah,
guard for a
yeah.
little bit too. So I don't know. The signing was more so for me. What next? What other moves are we going to
Yeah,
do to
I'd
build
agree.
around John
I'd agree.
Simpson? Because John Simpson is not the building block day one signing that we're like, yes, now we are moving forward and solving the
Sure.
offensive line. It's like, okay, we still have a guy that we don't really feel too great about that's sliding into this offensive line. So
Yeah,
interesting to
to
see.
me, like
Yeah.
Jets fans who want to be like disappointed, I guess. To me, this is just one of those like you expect to just sign guys that are kind of like, like it's free agency. Like,
Yeah.
and to me, that's him. Like
But
he's a guy who is maybe not great, but is gonna start. But like you said, like there needs to be more to it than that. And we're obviously doing kind of our what do we want to come next a little early here with the offensive line, but you're 100% right. Like there just needs to be more, and there will be, right? But will it be
yeah,
enough? Like it can't just be like a splattering of like meh, meh. Okay, this guy has played before. This guy has played before. Like you do need to get some skill on there, and some depth because there's not a ton at the moment on our depth
no,
chart.
there is not. Yeah, I'm looking through the list right now of guys that haven't already agreed to contracts. Again, we're recording this on the 12th, so if stuff comes out in the next 12 hours, we're not going to hop on here at 4 a.m. But like one of the big names that was connected was John Runyon, who is a very talented young guard from Green Bay. And instead, he gets his payday with the Giants, 3 years, 30 million. And you're like, okay,
He's overrated.
okay, fine.
Spin zone.
Spin zone. You got me there. I guess I can't beat
What
that.
where do you yeah, Kevin Zeitler is a name I see a lot. He seems like he'll be a higher end market guy. Was also with the Ravens with Simpson, you think about kind of getting some familiarity just built in there. Um, it's an option.
I like Glowinski, Mark Glowinski. He was a former guard with the Colts. He was right guard and then he signed with New York. I think he went to Buffalo in between as well too. So he's traveled around a bit. He's a little bit older, but has played right guard consistently right guard. You put him next to a talented tackle, I think he, just like any guard probably will, plays a little bit better. So that'd be another guy I'd keep an eye on. But again, to me, I much would rather go AVT at a tackle, 10th pick at a tackle, guard, and then depth pieces. Like to me,
Yeah.
I know we don't want him to be the starting guy, but if he's going to be his best friend, bring in Bakhtiari to be a bench tackle for the Jets. You know, he's going to be paid 19 million from Green Bay, so you
Yeah.
bring him in on a vet minimum, and if he needs to slide in, if the rookie's underperforming, maybe you put him at right tackle instead of left, and you moved AVT over. Like, there's so many options that you can work with. But when I think about how I want the Jets to be starting next year, like, I just get Dwayne Brown, Lakin vibes, which did work for a little bit. Dwayne did perform well his first season here with the Jets, but I think you
Yeah.
you need a little bit more stability, and the best way to do that is to get a little bit younger at those positions.
Yeah, I honestly like that a lot. Especially just that idea of like AVT is a guy who can play tackle, and so you almost kind of want to put him there because he's just that talented,
Yeah.
even though it's not like his natural position. Again, the things you have to worry about with all these guys is like injury concerns, whatnot, and we keep just circling back around to this, but clearly there's just more to be done. So like for
Yeah.
any Jets fans that are pissed or disappointed, all I'd say is like just hold on. Maybe you'll be allowed to be pissed and disappointed,
Hmm.
but it's not like all of our options have been signed to other teams and we just did nothing, like things have yet to happen. So I'm still hopeful that we'll get some deals done.
Yeah.
Bakhtiari is an interesting guy because everyone's just assuming that the deal is going to be done. We've been assuming the deal is going to be done. I mean, maybe he's just not a first 2 days of the legal tampering period guy. Like he
No.
doesn't have that demand,
No.
but
He doesn't. He's a
part of me
he's
is
a
like, is he gonna sign? I don't know, but
he should.
probably.
I think he definitely wants to. He at his highest talent, he was one of the best tackles in
Yeah.
football. But he's too far beyond that now. The leg injuries have been way too
He hasn't played
serious.
in like 4 years, it
He
seems.
should be thought of as a bench rotational offensive lineman. Now, if a
Yeah,
team
yeah.
says, here's a little bit more money, come be our starter, does he do that? Who knows? He's also at this later point in his career where I think he might enjoy to be alongside, this second surge with Aaron Rodgers. It all just depends what the player wants, but if he's coming to New York, it's not as a starter. I would not be bringing in David Bakhtiari to start at either tackle
Oh
position for
yeah,
the New
no, no,
York
no,
Jets next year. He's
no.
just a depth piece. Um, these ones I think we can almost breeze through. Simpson and Tyrod were the big ones that happened. Javon Kinlaw is an interesting one. Former first round pick for the San Francisco 49ers. He was essentially the DeForest Buckner replacement when they traded him to Indianapolis with that pick. Then they go and get him. Flamed out, didn't really make his strong rise alongside Eric Armstead. These guys kind of float all around. It's almost reminiscent to me of Solomon Thomas being a reclamation project in San Francisco. And then with the Jets, it's like these guys that are almost a little bit tweener at the defensive tackle position. They're not super great against the run, not super great against the pass, but a little bit of both. I don't expect him to be someone that is getting a ton of playing time, but another guy that, hey, has San Francisco ties and is now in here with the New York Jets. Go figure.
Yeah, yeah, has that familiarity, which Blake and I were talking about a little before we started, but just the idea that like these guys, Salah and all the people that they know, like you're always going to kind of lean to those guys you're familiar with. It also kind of seems like he's going to be, going from being like the seventh or eighth or ninth guy in the rotation in San Francisco to being the seventh or eighth or ninth guy in the rotation for the Jets, almost, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. Like it's not like we're signing him saying we really think he has this potential to step up. Not that obviously they want to believe that, but it's not like we have this like big hole where he's going to be playing, 50% of snaps. So yeah, interesting one. We'll see how it goes. Obviously there's always that hope with like former first rounders that someone will be able to get the potential out, but I think he'll be fine as a depth piece.
Yeah, he'll be your nose tackle. He'll be a depth piece, a big boy, 320. Not much to say. I think the
Yeah.
other, to me, that one and then signing Lecky Fotu from the Arizona Cardinals was more just these signings are more okay. We're not going to be bringing back some of the defensive tackles that we currently have as free agents. This is kind
Right.
of a new wave of guys coming in. Lecky Fotu is a fourth rounder, more of your run stuffer type defensive tackle, just filling in the holes along this defensive line. They're not going to be playing a ton. but they're going to serve one specific role here alongside the Jets defensive line. And I guess we could have lumped both of these together. I don't know if there's anything specifically with Lucky Fotu that you wanted to
Yeah,
get into.
I think Fotu, I mean, like obviously, like you just look at kind of like random stats and they paint whatever picture they do. But it seems like he's just been like a little bit more of a successful guy than Javon Kinlaw. When you look at like I think like run stuffing rates was one where he's ranked pretty highly compared to
Hmm.
Javon Kinlaw, who's a little worse. So yeah, I agree with you. We're replacing guys like Al Woods and Quentin Jefferson, and who are guys we could potentially still bring back. But yeah, to me, these are like depth line pieces. And again, it's like this whole list right here, right? It's all kind of signings I'm okay with. Like I don't hate that they made these moves. I think people are freaking out a little bit that they're not like these big blockbusters. But again, like that's not really what we were expecting from this free agency period, in my opinion. Um, so like I'm fine with all these moves, even though they're not like the sexiest moves, it seems.
Yeah, I think that's the bigger point about these signings, and also looping in Isaiah Oliver while we're here too, cornerback who was also most recently with the San Francisco 49ers, started as their nickel corner at the beginning of the season, played 44% of snaps out there for him. The depth along the Jets secondary is going to be so phenomenal next year. I did see Michael
Mm-hmm.
Carter come out on Twitter before we got on, the former running back Michael Carter, and tweeted at the Jets to pay his twin, the defensive back Michael Carter. So I don't know if a signing for a nickel corner kind of gets in the way of the other Michael Carter's future, because that'll be interesting to monitor. But I just wanted to say that piece, at least to the depth of this secondary, is unbelievable. But did you have anything on the other Michael Carter?
No, I feel stupid because I wish I could remember the name. Someone just became the highest paid nickel corner
Oh, Kenny
in the
Moore, Colts.
league.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. And so I think that's what Michael Carter's the running back's
Oh,
tweet was
that's what he's
about, was
referring
basically
to.
this guy should become, like when
Gotcha.
he's up for a deal. And like I am in on that. Like Michael Carter has been, in my opinion, the best corner and nickel corner in the league. He's been a star since he came into the league and started holding down that position for us. I think it's an underrated importance to a position. And,
In
again,
today's
like this whole
NFL,
Bryce Huff
especially.
situation, like we want to capitalize on guys that we get right, right? And he's a perfect example of it. It's not his time yet. I think that'll be kind of a next year conversation. But yeah, and just to quickly, Isaiah Oliver, we're set at our cornerback position almost, so just bringing in depth, fine with it.
Versatile piece, will play inside, will play outside corner.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Like whoever goes down, you can kind of trust him to play that role if there's an injury, whether it's nickel or outside.
lining in all five of these, though, I think we touched on it before and then we ditched it to talk about these real quick. But like the outrage of this free agency and the lack of razzle
Pop.
dazzle necessarily. Bop. Did we not just talk about how bad some of these deals were that Joe Douglas has been
Right.
giving out in free agency the last few years? This is the approach. This is what the approach should have been. It was tough at the time first because you're sitting there as a GM and you're like, well, we have this quarterback on a rookie deal and a fuck ton of cap space and a really bad team. So we need to bring guys in. You bring in Lawson, you bring in Uzama, you sign Jordan Whitehead to a 2-year deal. I have to make a correction, by the way. I said that he was cut in last week's episode. He was released. The contract just kind of ran its course. So I need to correct that there. But when you have all of this cap space and a bad team, you kind of just bring in guys because you need 53 of them to play and suit up on a weekly basis. And now they're in a situation where you don't really have that much flexibility. And even though you might have some, you need to keep a very even keel response to free agency. So I understand that it's unlike previous years where you go out and you get the top safety that was available in Whitehead, or Lawson at the time, who was thought to be the top edge rusher. But it's just, this is what free agency should be for a team that is trying to contend. It's not glitz and glamour. Who wins free agency really loses free agency. We've been saying that for a while. I'm very happy with this free agency approach. I can pick on John Simpson and say that, ha ha ha, He was, Laken Tomlinson 2.0, but giving 100 million to Robert Hunt, is that a smarter move? I don't know. I don't really think it is. So there's two sides to each. I would much rather the patient sign the second, third wave of free agency guys and build an actual team instead of just trying to get the headlines in day one of free agency.
Yeah, could not agree with you more. I mean, specifically talking about the Jets, right? Like you look at Laken Tomlinson, you look at Carl Lawson, you look at Alan Lazard, like those were the type of deals you were so excited for, right? And don't get me wrong, like a player like Calvin Ridley, we know is better than an Alan Lazard, right? Like we're aware of that. But that price tag also comes with that as well, you know? And like we said, right? Like Calvin Ridley, he's a question mark, right? Tyrone Smith, top tackle, he's a question mark. Like all these like number one guys, it's not just a surefire, like, oh, if you sign the top free agents, you're going to be great. And that has happened every single year. Last year we won free agency. The year before it kind of felt like we won free agency, even though it was a less amount of moves. Um, so yeah, I'm 100% with you. Again, I think there is more to be done, but the idea that we need to go out and get like the top names and pay the top money, and it's ridiculous that we're not doing that, just isn't accurate, you know? And everyone wants to, oh my gosh, excuse me.
Get the
Everyone wants to
burpees.
bitch and complain about like we're bargain shopping, where how can a team that is fighting for their jobs and only has 1 year to do it, like how can they be not willing to spend? And it's like there's plenty of guys still available, and we're not gonna sign, the top free agent at every position because that's not the way you win, right? Like it's just like these like we all want to say like, man, like free agency, it's really not the easiest thing, and there's a ton of guys that you just overpay. But then when we're in it, we're like, why are we not overpaying for everybody? You know what I mean? Like we do have good players on our team. There's obviously things that need to get ironed out, but when you look at like, do you have a number one wide receiver? Do you have a number one running back? Do you have a quarterback? Like a lot of those things are there. So this idea that we just need to be spending, 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 it's like there's still plenty of people to be signed. We will add people, but it's not like we're in this situation where it's like we have nobody and we need to start getting people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to think about who is making the big headlines so far this offseason, it's the Panthers are making all these big purchases along the offense and defensive lines. What do we know about the Panthers? They're really dysfunctional. They don't really know what they're doing running that organization over there. So throw them away. Miami. I can't wait to talk about Miami at the beginning of this season because they're making this decision to go all in and give a big fat $240 million contract to Tua while also bringing in these other free agents. And the money spending is just out of control. Meanwhile, you've got, let's see, who are some of the other teams? San Francisco, relatively quiet. Kansas City, relatively quiet. Detroit, relatively quiet. You could say those teams are really good, so maybe they don't need to go out and make big signings, but they're doing these subtle second wave, third wave guys. And let's keep reminding ourselves the Jets roster, 85% of it is good. 100% of the defense is good outside of maybe safety depth and a third edge rusher. The Jets defense is set. The Jets offense has a number one wide receiver. It has a really good quarterback. It has a top running back. It's got a young offensive lineman that's exciting, a rookie they drafted that's good. Other options at receiver, like we have to consider that the roster is good just because they were so bad last year. It wasn't a lack of talent, it was bad quarterback and offensive gameplay. That's what it
Sure.
was.
And you look at the places that need improvement, right? Like what so like you just said, we have succeeded on defense. Our offense has good pieces but has some holes, right? So what do we need to do? We need to add on the offensive line. Like the Jets with their, 40-ish million of available cap space, we're not going to be one of the teams handing out a $100,000 contract to
Million.
Robert Hunt. Yep, 100 million. Like Onwenu, or however you say his last name, like he
Yeah.
re-signs with the Patriots. Obviously, that would have been a great one to have, but he went back to the team he was with. It's another big chunk of change. You look at these other guys, like you mentioned, John Runyon. There's a lot of guys on this list. Yeah, sure. If we had signed them, would it have been horrible? No, but there's other guys that are kind of right there with them, in my opinion, that are still available. And then you jump to the wide receiver list. Like, are
I'm on it
we
right
gonna
now.
are we going to lose all our games because we didn't get Darnell Mooney or Gabe Davis or Devin Duvernay or Devonta Parker or Jalen Reagor? Like, no, those are not the make or break guys. Do we need to add at receiver? Yes. Are, you know, is the list dwindling a little? For sure, but it wasn't great to start with, right? In my opinion, right now, you look at these receivers, Hollywood Brown is the name that, obviously Calvin Ridley is the number one name. It seems like we're not as invested in that right now. It seems like
Mm-mm.
he wants to be with the Jaguars. Maybe the Patriots make an offer he can't refuse. It seems like that's not going to happen. So my first instinct would be a guy like Hollywood Brown, because I do think he's a talented receiver who has been able to be the number one at times before. Then there's a lot of kind of like just a guy guys, which is fine. It's obviously not ideal, but it's like, if we didn't get Darnell Mooney and we have to get Tyler Boyd instead or MVS instead, like those, that doesn't move the needle for me. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
to me, people want to freak out we
Splitting
haven't signed
hairs.
people. In my opinion, we're not really missing out on anyone that we really would have got or been in on,
That
other
would
than
have
a handful of maybe the guard and tackle names.
that would have pushed us over the top. That's exactly the
Right.
point. Is like all these guys are there might be some that are just a hair above the other, but there's not
Right.
somebody out here that is like, we signed this guy, we officially have the best offensive line in football. The Super Bowl chase is back on. It's just not out there right now. It's not out there in free agency at all. You build guys through the draft, through undrafted free agency, through trades. You keep the guys that are good in the building. You let the guys that aren't or maybe worth too much in the open market go. And that's just the cycle we're on.
And I think wide receivers is such like there's not big name wide receivers, elite wide receivers are going to be traded or they're going to be re-signed. Like
Yep.
they rarely hit free agency. And a guy like Calvin Ridley hits free agency after he had a hot start after missing 2 years, you know, and is a big question mark on how well he's going to be. You know what I mean? A guy like Hollywood Brown, who's been up and down, like like it's not these top tier names. Um, and there's that idea that we know basically we're going to be taking a tackle in the draft. So these other kind of priorities that we have, I don't think you need to be as urgent. So yeah, I'm totally with you. I don't hate the Jets approach here at all. Obviously, you need to keep adding people, but in my opinion, this is kind of what we should be doing.
I am curious your thoughts before we talk about what we want to do next through the remaining parts of free agency.
We're
Wide
gonna do
receiver
that.
trades. No, no, not specific names. No, 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 no. I haven't sold you on some guys
Sure,
yet.
sure, sure.
The you made me lose my train of thought. The lack of
Sorry.
no, I'm just teasing you. The lack of I guess pursuing of trades in the wide receiver market right now is interesting. Like we just were a few hours ago, Deontay Johnson gets traded to the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers send back a cornerback and they flip some late round picks. Panthers move up a little bit in the draft from the 200s to the late 100s, whatever it ends up being. That's a move that I think, okay, Joe Douglas could or should have been in on that because right now we don't have a second round pick. Wide receivers are losing a little bit of value in overall free agency right now because the first two rounds and maybe even the third of the NFL draft are going to be so wide receiver heavy. So on one side, you could be thinking, okay, great. Maybe that means we end up being the biggest suitor for a Hollywood Brown because other teams are going to just rather take a guy early day two in the NFL draft. But also at the same time, when Deontay Johnson gets flipped for a late round pick, and Deontay had a great season in 2020, but has been inconsistent at times. I think it's more due to the play of the quarterback in Pittsburgh. But why wouldn't you get yourself involved in the trade market like that? Like, why wasn't Joe Douglas pursuing it? Because it came out that he wasn't. There's some other guys out there in the trade markets that they haven't been pursuing. It's apparently Cortland Sutton isn't being made available at the moment in Denver. So like the trade market's dwindling, the names aren't there in free agency. They don't have a second round pick. So what would you want the plan then to be at wide receiver? First, answer the trade about Deontay and not getting involved, but then also like what would you rather them do at this point?
Yeah, going into tonight, my idea was definitely the trade, right? And it seems like there's not these great players or like good players really available in free agency and maybe a trade. Like I'm a big Cortland Sutton guy, right? So trading for him to me, I think he could have brought a lot of value, especially as a number two. And it stinks that like right before the podcast, you tell me that like the report came out that he's not available. Deontay Johnson, another guy, yeah, has it been up and down for sure, but he is a solid player, no questions about it. Of course, I would want to be in on that, and I do think there's that weird aspect of like, okay, they traded for a cornerback, so maybe there was just like we don't have what they're looking for, or whatever it may be. Um, you know, I would love to be in on DeAndre Johnson. Like, if you want to criticize Joe Douglas for that, that's fine with me because it does almost feel like you said, like the options are dwindling, and so the move needs to be made. Um, and Deontay Johnson would have been better than anyone on this list, right? Like, I'm basically at the point where if we sign Hollywood Brown, I'm confident that I think Hollywood Brown is good enough to be a number 2 wide receiver, to have Alan Lazard be the third guy. He can be a big body. You can put, really any of the three to play the slot because Lazard plays slot too, even though he's a big body. Um, but really after that on the free agency market, and again, I'm kind of acting like we're just not going to get Ridley. Ridley, I'd be fine with as well. To me, there's not a name that gives me that confidence of like, you can for sure be our number 2 receiver, right? So I do have worries there on how we are going to end up addressing the receiver room, um, which I think is fair. Like, I mean, where do you stand on that? Because to me, Cortland Sutton, Deontay, Judy already got dealt, right? Like, there's not a ton of guys that are coming to my mind of like, oh, they're actively being shopped outside of maybe someone like T. Higgins, who isn't actively being shopped. He just requested a trade, right? So, and the pay tag is probably too much for what we have. So do you have like people in mind that we could trade for? Because I'd love for you to tell me some.
Not anything on the trade, but I do want to sell you on a guy in free agency.
All right.
You
Is it
ready?
Braxton Berrios?
Nope, not Braxton Berrios.
All right.
It was a guy that a year ago I pled for.
Oh my God. I
And the
know
Jets were in
exactly who
on
it's
it.
going to be.
Of
I know
course you do.
exactly who it's going to
Everybody
be.
listening to this knows exactly. Let me sell you on it. Let me sell
I
you on it.
didn't until this
No,
moment.
let me sell you on it.
Okay.
Odell Beckham Jr. tears his ACL in the Super Bowl against Los Angeles Rams. But he had a terrific season with Los Angeles, and he hits free agency after his season ending, or a year after his torn ACL, and he is just looking for that big payday, fresh off of one of his more productive seasons since his early days in New York. So the Jets are very involved. I think they're in the $12 million range, and then Baltimore topped in at like 14, 15 brings him in. Now the Ravens don't have that prolific of a passing offense. I think that we could be excited about what Zay Flowers brought in his rookie season, but still at times, and we watched it in that playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs, when Lamar needed to pass throughout the course of a game, the offense was not there. He kind of pooped his pants like he did in that Monday Night Football game against the Browns. So to me, when I look at Odell, he had a few moments throughout the season that you were like, okay, he is a shifty guy working the middle of the field. He made some really fun plays throughout the season, but I don't think he was a great fit for that offense. Whereas I think they were more ground and pound, and he needs to be more featured to get the most out of Odell. I think he's going to sign with the Jets this offseason. I think he's going to be that guy that you put in the middle of the field to work his way around. He's going to be a high volume guy. Aaron Rodgers is going to work the quick passing game with him brilliantly. I think that is a much better fit schematically than ever placing him in Baltimore, where it's run, 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 pass. Run, 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 pass. Like there just is a groove that a guy needs to get into at that point, and Odell has been that guy that in the quick passing game, quick slant, take it 80 to the house. Maybe he doesn't have the top end speed anymore, but like to me, I think the signing happens. I think he's going to be like, I feel confident he's going to sign with New York this time because I think he wants to be with more of a pro style quarterback. And I don't mean pro as in professional, but pro as in just like your throw first quarterback. I think that Odell would be a very valuable and cheaper option. His market is going to be 5 million, 6 million. It is not going to be much. He's probably just looking for a 1-year deal to essentially do what he did with Matthew Stafford in that year they went to the Super Bowl, whereas he boosts his value up again on a smaller deal and hopefully gets another payday beyond that. I just, when you look at who's available and the cost they're going to be at, I have seen at their peaks, Odell be better than anybody else on this list. And while I don't think he is at his peak, I think you got a veteran guy in there that really just wants to win and be successful at this point in his career. I don't think you're dealing with the same diva stuff you were a decade ago with New York or in Cleveland. I think you got a guy that just wants to win. That's why he was looking at the Jets and the Ravens last year and only them. It just makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. And if you're stuck with the money on Allen Lazard at the outside and you've got Garrett Wilson that you can move in and out as the number one, I just love the idea of working those two deep the field. And then, oh shit, we got Odell on that inside route that then he takes forward for 25 yards. I just think he fits
Sure.
what the wide receiver room needs most at this point. Whereas, and we texted this about Sutton, I think Sutton is a really good player compared to an Allen Lazard, but you're investing a lot of money into a guy that has the same type of skill set, where I think diversifying Odell options on the market outside of course, a Hollywood Brown who's a younger guy that really has the top speed and could be a fun addition to the offense. Odell will do a lot of the dirty work in the middle of the field that I think this offense does not currently have.
Yeah, I don't fully disagree, and for what the Jets need to kind of like shore up the room, I think Odell could provide that. I do kind of differ in how I view Odell. Like, to me, he's a guy who certainly over the last 2 years has shown he can, or I guess 3 years because, or I guess
He
I don't
missed the
know, he had the
season, yeah. So
injury, but yeah, yeah,
he
yeah.
missed the entire 22 season.
Right. So sure. But when I think of Odell, like that doesn't scream reliability to me, I guess. Like he can maybe have his moments, but I don't see him out there being like our go-to guy. I think you
You don't
talk
need him to
about the
be.
year with no, sure, but even just to be like our number two wide receiver, it still gives me pause. Not saying it, I do kind of agree that when you look at the list of free agents outside of Ridley and Hollywood Brown, he's kind of the next best option. So that's why I'm kind of agreeing with you here. I just caution like, you say with the Ravens, like they were run, 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 pass, like the Ravens definitely threw more than they ever have last year. And Odell wasn't better than like a Zay Jones and was kind of like he didn't always play over Rashad Bateman, like he's a good player and he can bring those things, but I don't think he's just like a surefire, like play in, play out. He's going to be in there for you
Hmm.
as that number two guy. So that's where I get hesitant just because of those like question marks. Um, but I do kind of agree with you that it makes a lot of sense. After we were so close to getting it done, it felt like he was going to come last year, didn't, and then now he's going to be leaving Baltimore again. Um, if we're just only going to be addressing it free agent, I guess I don't hate it a ton, but I'm definitely not like super sold on the idea.
Yeah, and I think the idea of being able to get him now and at a third of the cost would be a lot better
Sure,
way to look at
that
it
was
too.
a
Like
big factor last year.
paying him 12 million versus paying him if he gets a $5 or $6 million deal, that's a
Yeah,
lot better. And you're right, he's not going to be even I don't even want to say he'll be a number two. I think at the end of the day, when I keep looking at this team, it sucks to say it, but I do think we are living in a world where Allen Lazard is the wide receiver two next year, just because
sure.
of you're hoping that, like with everything, the Aaron Rodgers rebound is going to help him more than maybe anybody else on the roster. So then if I'm thinking if those are going to be my top two guys, Garrett Wilson and Lazard, where can I fit in the other pieces? And I think a guy that wants to play with Aaron Rodgers, he looked at Green Bay when he before he chose the Rams, and I think it did come down to money at that point, or maybe just title aspirations,
Yeah.
but I know those were two of his final shots. He'd finally get to do it. He'd be back in New York, which would be fun. I'm always gonna feel a certain type of way about Odell because I do love him. And he was one
No,
of
yeah, and
those
I do,
guys that
when you say he's definitely going to be a Jet, like I really don't. I expected to kind of be like, nah, but it does make a lot of sense. And like you said, right, it's like he's not necessarily going to be the always number two, and you probably are going to have a lot of Lazard as well, but
mhm.
he can still at least provide that pop of like, even if it's not game in, game out, he can give you 100-yard game, and
Yeah,
he can be a volume 7, 8, 9 receptions just in the short game and just hope he does something. So,
yeah.
so yeah, I could buy in. Let's get it done so I can be excited about something.
I'll build it up. Anything else on free agency? We've been just kind of spitballing around here.
I just
Any
want to get ahead while we're on the receiver topic. If we sign Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I will not be mad. I'm actually low-key a fan of MVS. Especially just like I know we've been doing the whole he used to play with Rodgers thing,
Yeah,
but what Rodgers and MVS were so good at were like those deep balls, and MVS was just that type of guy that would make the play when he needed it most. And to me, like just getting a guy that has that familiarity, like you think about a Randall Cobb, but still has a lot more talent than Randall Cobb,
yeah.
I would be in on it. Just if it happens, I'm not saying it's gonna, but a lot of Jets fans are gonna be like, "Oh my fucking god, I'm getting ahead of it. I'm into it." Um, Otherwise, yeah, I mean, there's more to be done, but I'm not panicked yet.
There is something to be said about being the reliable, like, I'm going to go to this guy for multiple really great quarterbacks. Like, there
Sure.
are even at times where, Rashee Rice came along strong for the Chiefs last year. So MVS's role kind of dwindled. But early on with MVS in Kansas City, he was relied on as like, when I need something, I'm going to take a shot with you.
And even throughout the playoff run, like
He
even if
showed
it was
up.
only one or two plays a game, he made important plays. You
Yep.
know what I'm saying? Like that won games. And to me, he's just like a veteran you can trust. So just getting ahead of that. But yeah, it'll be interesting. This receiver kind of thing, because we're not going to be adding a first round receiver. It does feel like that's where we need to do something correctly.
If we just had our second round pick, we wouldn't have this conversation because it
I
would be
know.
taking a guy in
Sure.
the second round. But we're in this spot where it's
Sure.
like we need to figure out whether it be by trade or free agency or another trade during draft day to get into the second round. Like we just don't have so many of these teams now that are just gonna let, their free agent wide receiver walk because they've got pick 32 in the draft, or sorry, pick 36 in the draft. It's like we know that they
Yep.
can go
Yep.
in and just bring in another dude. So yeah, it'll be
I'd
interesting
love
to see.
Lad McConkey.
Yeah, white boy out of Georgia, White Lightning. I like
Yeah,
Lad.
yeah.
He's a fun boy. Um, yeah, so I guess that'll wrap things up for us today. I apologize if we were a little scrambled eggs at the time. This was a chaotic kind of day, and I think it's also as we get into free agency a little bit more, we'll have a better feeling of where the Jets need to attack. It's tough to really project what needs to happen moving forward when we've only just started. But at least we can feel comfortable knowing. And from the start, we knew that getting your offensive lineup, getting a weapon in there in the receiver room, now a little bit more depth on the edge. They got D tackle taken care of, maybe a safety signing addition. We kind of have a general feel, but hopefully the next few days will give us a better understanding of what the Jets specifically need to attack, and especially it can help us kind of look toward the draft as well too.
For sure. Next week we'll have a much more rounded out free agent class.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, as I've been saying, I don't think we've missed out on everyone.
Nope.
So I don't think it's time to start panicking.
The guy that I'm upset that we missed out on is Bryce Huff. That's my big takeaway. And maybe Runyon from the Packers, who's now with the Giants. Like those would be the two that I'm like, nah, wish I could have had them, but we can't. So we move on. All right. So thank you guys for listening to another episode of Keeping Up with the New York Jets, the NFL's premier reality drama. You can follow us on Twitter at KUWTNYJ, same as our YouTube channel. Teddy is at Teddy Huncho. I am at Spring Blake with 4 A's in there. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll talk to you next week. Peace.